They have some diesel fuel and diesel generators that will keep you going for a few days to even a few weeks. What that's designed to deal with is accidents, not terrorists taking out transformers and so forth. So one really needs to be able to island the military bases. One needs to be able to triage and thin down the requirements to what is absolutely essential for the mission to function. Do as much of that as you can, maybe with renewables on base, and also have links into things like hospitals and police installations and so forth outside the fence of the unit, of the base, because if something like this happens, the military is part of society too, and you're not going to be able to function just inside the base and have the hospitals be without power and the police cars be without fuel and so forth outside. So we've got to start taking some very decisive and relatively quick steps to move toward the ability to generate military power on base. I think much of it will be renewables, but possibly not all, and to make it possible for bases to function in the event of a terrorist attack on the grid. To my mind, those two areas are the two biggest that affect the military, and both, each in its own way, is huge. Yes?
Earl Haig with Clean Fuels Development Coalition. There was a recent article in the Omaha World Herald where a former Saudi official said that Saudi has reached peak oil about 3 years ago. And that's why we're really not seeing any relief in the price. And for every million barrels a day that demand goes up, we're going to see a price attached to that. Is there any buzz in the energy security area or national security tied to that recent announcement that would be true?
Well, the only thing I know of is the Simmons book about peak oil. I think it's a carefully done piece of work. I'm no geologist, so I'm not the judge, but he looks like he has gotten into something important, and oil has been peaking in other places. The biggest field in Mexico is headed down in production. The Kuwaitis a few months ago very quietly sort of let on as how their reserves were only about a third of what they had been thinking for some time. And so I think there is at least a reasonable chance that one or more of the big Saudi fields has peaked or will peak very soon. But my judgment about that is no better than anybody else's. I do think that we are in a situation where Chinese and to some extent Indian and the rest of the developing world demand, together with the slacking off of production in other parts of the world, like Mexico, is going to keep a rather solid upward pressure on oil prices and make it very difficult for the Saudis to do what they did in '85 and then again partly by choice and partly because of the Asian recession in the late 90s, and drive oil down into single digits. I think it's going to be almost impossible for them to do that, even if their fields aren't peaking. Now, the question arises, though, even if they can't get it down to single digits, if they want to bankrupt their competitors, like renewable fuels or tar sands in Canada, how about if they would drive it down to, say, $30 a barrel, $20 or $30 a barrel? That would sure make life difficult for a lot of the alternatives, even though it would make life pleasant for those of us when we pull into the filling station buy gasoline, at least temporarily. I think they are most unlikely to do that if we are in a world of plug-in hybrids, because plug-in hybrids mean you are driving at about 1/10 the cost of gasoline. 5-cent kilowatt hour off-peak overnight electricity is about a penny, maybe 2 cents a mile. And there's no way, whereas gasoline days maybe 12, 14 cents a mile. So you're going down an order of magnitude. There's virtually no way the Saudis can turn on any pumps, no matter how many they turn on, and no matter, even if peaking is not the case, there's no way they can turn on the pumps and drive the price of oil down low enough to compete with 1 to 2 cent a mile off-peak overnight power electricity. So in a way, I think electricity helps protect the other alternative fuels from the Saudi tactic. It's not just Saudi tactic, it was John D. Rockefeller's tactic. It's a tactic of any monopolist who wants to maintain a monopoly and drive the price down and defeat his competitors. I think they won't get started on that route because it is so difficult for them to do that now socially in terms of their commitments to their people and the rest. And if they can't win, I think it's unlikely they start. So we're stronger for two reasons. One, if we execute this double envelopment of petroleum products with alternative fuels and electricity. We're stronger because we make it easier on both electricity and alternative liquids if we're not completely relying on one or the other. And we also, by the very cheapness of electricity, make it possible for us to be, I think, reasonably confident the Saudis are not going to be able to pull their 1985, 1999 move.
We have time for one more question.
Yes?
Peter Road, Energy Washington. AEG bought has scheduled to buy 1,000 megawatts of storage batteries, large storage batteries, with, I guess, the eventual idea of making something like wind power or base load. Does that have a role or a bigger role than
It has a big role once we can get away from lead acid. Lead acid is extremely expensive and bulky to do that with, and it would add substantially to the price of wind. But keep your eye on zinc bromide and maybe some other things that are coming along. What's happening in battery technology now, both for mobile batteries like lithium-ion with different types of cathodes to get away from the fire problem, with zinc bromide and other possibilities to replace lead acid, is that a business and an industry that basically did not change at all for nearly a century and a half. I mean, a lead acid battery of 120, 130 years ago is essentially the lead acid battery of today, except you don't have to add water. That's about the only thing that happened in well over a century. But because none of us wants to have these things plugged in more than once a day, consumer electronics has provided a huge boost to batteries. And as the implications of that, things like plug-in hybrids are clear, other battery developments have started. And so you are seeing a creativity in the world of batteries as well as photovoltaics and alternative liquid fuels from genetic engineering of biocatalysts that is kind of a perfect storm of technological innovation. I think saying that batteries aren't going to change or photovoltaics are going to stay where they are is exactly like being around Silicon Valley in the beginning of the 80s or so and saying, well, you know, this fad with these little apples, that's not going to go anywhere. Mainframes are always going to dominate. I think we are in the midst of a three-part technological revolution that's going to have a big impact, and one of the big ones is going to be making cheap storage so you can use the intermittents like wind and solar a lot more readily. And I don't think it'll be lead acid, but I think it's coming in battery technology of one sort or another. Thank you.
Mr. Woolsey, thank you very much for that very thoughtful address. On behalf of the Renewable Fuels Association and the Reserve Officers Association, I'd like to give you what I hope will be a nice coffee table book, etched in stone, Monuments of America that are in stone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.